This story takes place when I was 22 years old. I had just gotten home from a long night of stocking shelves at my local grocery store. I worked the closing shift, so I usually got home around midnight. I shared a cheap apartment with my roommate, Mark. We weren't in the best of neighborhoods, but I just felt lucky to have a place to live that wasn't my parents' basement. I threw my jacket on the coat rack next to the front door and walked into the kitchen to rummage through the fridge for something to eat. I had just pulled a frozen burrito out of the freezer when I noticed something weird. My bedroom door had been slightly open when I walked by the hallway. I know this doesn't sound strange at first, but I specifically remembered closing it that morning when I left for work. I like my privacy, so I always remember to shut my door when I leave for the day. I stepped back into the living room and looked down the hall. "Hello?" I called. There was just dead silence. Not wanting to let the fear get the better of me, I walked across the living room and flicked on the hallway light switch. "Mark? Is that you?" I asked. Mark had always been a bit of an odd guy, so I couldn't help but think that maybe he was trying to play some sort of weird prank on me. Maybe waiting to jump out of my closet or something when I entered my room. When I finally got to the bedroom door, I gently pushed it open. The light from the hallway illuminated a large portion of the room. I looked around, definitely feeling the creepy vibes. There was no one, and nothing looked out of the ordinary. Just the usual, my twin bed, with my nightstand just to the left. I closed the door shut and walked back into the kitchen. I popped my dinner in the microwave and pressed the start button. While that was cooking, I turned on the television, ready to put on a scary movie to watch and relax. Suddenly I heard a muffled thump coming from down the hall. At first I thought it was the neighbors or something. They can be pretty loud sometimes, and it's not unusual to hear a loud bump in the night. But then it happened again, and this time I could tell for sure it was coming from down the hall. "Mark?" I called once more. The microwave beeped just then, and I nearly had a heart attack. "Yeah, sorry, dropped something," I could hear him say through the door. I'll admit, I felt a little better knowing that Mark was home. I walked back into the kitchen to get my food, and that's when my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message from Mark. "Hey dude, running a little late here at work. Could you please leave the door unlocked for me?" My stomach dropped to the floor, and a chill ran down my spine. I texted back, "Wait, you're still at work?" He responded only a few seconds later, "Yeah, why?" At that moment there was another noise from the hall, and I looked up. The silhouette of a large man was standing there, holding what appeared to be a butcher's knife. I turned and ran towards the front door, hearing the heavy clunk of the man's boots behind me. He wasn't running. Instead, it sounded like he was slowly walking, taking his time. I didn't stop to look back. I ran down the emergency staircase and out into the parking lot where I called the cops. The cops showed up just a few minutes later. They went upstairs and searched my apartment, but they said they didn't find anyone. What they did find still terrifies me to this day. As they were searching the apartment, the cops found a note left on the kitchen table, held under a salt shaker. On that note, only one word was written, which was soon. I was home alone one night back in 2009. My parents were out on their weekly date nights. One of those, had one too many at dinner and passed out in the movie theater kind of dates. Anyways, I had just returned from my afternoon jog. Being a hot August day, I had worked up quite a sweat on my run, so I had decided to take a cold shower and clean up a bit. My house doesn't have air conditioning and was quite stuffed up, so I decided to open a few windows to circulate the airflow within the house. I can remember opening a window in the kitchen, 2 windows across from each other in the living room, and 1 window in the basement. I knew I was going to be spending my evening down there watching movies since it was much cooler. I had my shower, got dressed, and went downstairs to make myself some dinner. I took my dinner down to the basement and flicked on Netflix to start my binge-filled night of new shows. I do not recall falling asleep, but I must have passed out not long after eating my food and lying down. When I woke up, it was dark outside. The only light being cast into the basement was from the dimly lit TV screen. It was now freezing in the basement. I could feel a cold breeze circulating the room from having the window open for too long. I got up and walked over to the light switch that was located at the bottom of the stairs. I closed the window, then went back to turn off the TV, grab my dishes and head upstairs. When I got upstairs, all the lights were off, indicating that my parents were still not home from their date. I cleaned the dishes, put them in the dishwasher, and closed the window above the sink. Just before I went to go up to my room for the night, I remembered that the windows in the living room were still open. I walked over to close the one window by the TV, then over to the next, which was located by the front porch. I noticed that my mom's vase with fake flowers was knocked off the table in front of the window, and the flowers were sprawled out across the floor. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe there was a strong breeze and the curtains had tipped it over. I closed the window and started picking up the flowers. As I was cleaning, I heard a faint, squeaky sound. What I could only imagine was a door handle being twisted. I listened as hard as possible. Following the squeak of the handle was a creak in the hallway floor upstairs. A pain shot from my stomach to my chest and I froze. What seemed like an eternity of being bent over, with my one hand holding the vase and the other clutching the flowers, I slowly stood up. I looked out the front window to check the driveway for my parents' car, hoping it was one of them upstairs. The driveway was empty. My heart sank. I quickly but quietly put the vase and flowers down on the table and silently began walking over to the bottom of the stairs to look up. As I got closer to the stairs, I heard two more creaks on the floor which caused me to stop dead in my tracks. I waited listening. Nothing. I was now only a few steps from the stairs. I took those last few steps and put one hand on the railing. I peeked around the corner and only saw darkness. I didn't know what to do. Do I flick on the lights and let the potential intruder in my house know that I'm coming upstairs? Do I leave and go to a friend's house? Do I call my parents? Do I grow a pair and just go upstairs? I decided to turn my phone on silent and go to the kitchen to text my dad, making sure I was close to the back door for an easy getaway. He said, "It's an old house. It's just settling after a really hot day." I told him about the sound of the door handle twisting. He just assumed there was an open window upstairs, and the wind was knocking a door against the frame. Could it just be a window that was left open? I felt a huge chunk of my anxiety start to fade after talking with my dad. So I decided to grab a glass of water and head to bed. I flicked on the lights for the stairs and started making my way up, but slowly, a tiny knot in my stomach from before. I got to the top of the stairs and noticed that all of the doors were wide open, except for mine. My parents' room and spare bedroom were on the left, and the den and my room were on the right, with the bathroom at the end of the hallway. Though, as my dad had predicted, my door was cracked just enough that a breeze could be making it hit the frame. It being as hot as it was today, it wasn't unusual for my mom to open all the doors and windows upstairs. I exhaled a sigh of relief, now fully confident that my dad was right. I turned on the lights to my room, did a quick look around and walked over to my nightstand to put my water beside my laptop, then went off to the bathroom to get ready for bed. As I lay in bed trying to get sleepy, I was watching my favorite reruns of Seinfeld on my laptop. Then out of nowhere I heard a sound of something slowly scraping my closet door. I quickly flicked on the light beside my bed. My closet door was cracked open ever so slightly. Questions started racing through my head. Was it open the whole time? Was it closed when I came in? I was positive that it was closed when I came in. Before I even had time to rationalize my thoughts, I heard the most disturbing, creepy, quiet, sinister laugh I've ever heard in my life. No horror movie could ever replicate the sound I just heard. As soon as I slid my laptop off my legs, the closet door burst open and someone was standing in the closet. My clothes were partially covering their body and face. I looked closer, and there was the most sickly, palest, dirtiest woman I have ever seen. For the split second that I saw her in horror, the image was burned into my brain forever. She had no shoes on her disgusting, dirt-stained feet. Her skin was sickeningly white with cuts, and dried blood from her face, down her arms, all the way to her legs. She was wearing what I assume used to be a white nightgown, was now a discolored mess of dirt, blood, and who knows what else. Her gray, blue-veined, sunken-in face closely resembled a decaying skeleton. The rest of her face was hidden by my clothes. She asked in a quiet, grumbling, raspy voice, "Have you seen my baby?" That was enough for me to grab my phone and run. As soon as I was halfway out my bedroom door, I heard her shriek, "Give me back my baby," and clothes hangers thrashing around behind me. I ran as fast as I could to the upstairs bathroom and locked the door. It was only a second later that I heard a huge crash against the door, along with the woman screaming in a devilish tone demanding I return her baby to her. I called 911, and the operator assured me the police would be there as fast as they could. I jammed my feet against the door and held my back against the sink, trying my hardest to make sure the door stayed closed. The woman would not let up, though. Her shrieks turned into low, demon-like grunts, and her banging on the door turned into heavy bodily blows. With what seemed like an eternity, I heard a heavenly sound. I heard the police call out that they were entering the residence. I yelled at the top of my lungs that I was upstairs. All I could hear next was a mixed commotion of the officers yelling and the woman growling. The officers ended up pepper spraying the woman, and it took 3 of them to be able to force her to the ground. She was yelling in a possessed-like state the entire time. I did not come out of the bathroom until the cops assured me she was out of the house. The cops told me she was likely on drugs, or an escaped mental patient from the next county over. I tried telling them that she sounded like she was possessed or something, but they chalked it up to the woman just needing her medication. My parents arrived home shortly after I gave my statements to the police. We moved out of that house a month later. That was one night I was home alone that sadly I will never forget. While growing up, I often had opportunities to stay home alone. When I was younger, since my mother and father were forced to travel because their parents were ill and lived overseas, and my older siblings wouldn't get off work until at least an hour or 2 after I finished school. I was used to being home alone, and actually enjoyed it. One Saturday, when I was 12, my parents had to go to a funeral for an old friend in the next city. My brother had already moved out by then, and my sister was nowhere to be found, so my parents decided to leave me home alone for the entire day. I was so excited. Being home alone for a whole day meant I could blast music and spend as much time as I wanted on the computer. When my brother moved out, we converted his bedroom, the last one at the end of the hallway, into an office, and my computer was in there. We still had dial-up internet at the time, so my parents added an extra phone line in the house, so I would stop taking up their line. I ran into the office to use what I called my personal phone line, to call my friend who lived a few streets over to see if she wanted to come hang out. She was really upset. She told me she was having boyfriend problems and needed someone to talk to, so she'd be right over. I thought to myself, girl talk means we need a good treat, and ran out of the office so that I could go check out what was in the kitchen. That's when I saw her. A pale woman dressed all in black, with a black bun on her head. Her head tilted as I ran by the corner. I couldn't really see her eyes, but for some reason, I remember thinking that she was smiling. I got some serious chills and felt instantly frozen, but I ignored it, thinking I was paranoid from being alone all day, and ran down the stairs. I couldn't believe my imagination was playing tricks on itself like that. I called my friend to see if she had left yet, and since no one answered the phone at her house, I figured she had. Something still didn't feel right, so I put on my jacket and headed out to the driveway to wait for her. When she arrived, she asked me what I was doing outside. I said, something weird just happened, but I'll tell you over white hot chocolate. And we went inside, took off our coats, and drank our hot chocolate in the kitchen, while she told me about the problem she was having with her boyfriend. Since both her boyfriend and I had webcams, and we knew he had friends over, we went into my computer room upstairs to call him and see if him and his friends wanted to web chat with us. While she was on the phone with him, I was talking to his friend on the computer and setting up my webcam. While my friend was on the phone, she turned around and looked out the door into the hallway. She told her boyfriend that she'd have to call him back. She looked at me, wide-eyed and white-faced, and said, "There's a woman in your hallway wearing a black dress." I got up from my computer chair and closed the door without looking into the hallway. I frantically tried to remember if I had told her why I was outside when she got there. I then asked her, "Didn't I mention that when you got here?" And she said, "No." And I said, "How was her hair?" And my friend said, "In a bun." We both freaked out, opened the door, made sure the coast was clear, and bolted down the stairs. I called my parents and told them I was going to my friend's house, but they told me they were a few minutes away and insisted that I wasn't leaving the house. When they got home, I told them what happened, but they didn't believe me. For the next few days, I kept thinking I was seeing her, but I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, because I was scared, or because she was really there. Weird things happened too, like the calendar in my bedroom would be upside down when I got home from school, or things would go missing from my room. Eventually, these weird occurrences stopped, but a couple of months later, we adopted a 2-year-old cat. From the moment she was brought home, all the way up to today, she has 3 or 4 random corners of the house that she meows at constantly, and every once in a while, after meowing at a particular spot, she shrieks and runs away as fast as she can. One of these spots is in my bedroom, and lately she's been mewing at it every night. To this day, I'm freaked out about that woman. It happened a few years ago when I was 15, a sophomore in high school. It seemed like just another November Friday night in my quiet home in Ohio. I live on the border of the country area, with a thick forest, and further on, a field across from my house. I should probably note that I only had a few houses surrounding me. Not really many of my friends lived where I was. There was the old couple to my left. They usually have family over on the weekends, but tonight it was quiet and calm over there. To my right, there was a middle-aged couple. They were gone that night as they routinely work night shifts at wherever they work. Finally, across and far down to the left of my house was another nice couple who have a very sweet 4-year-old who always loves to come over and be with me and my 9-year-old brother. My parents decided to go out and be together for the night. Whenever they do this, they are usually out pretty late into the morning, and my brother was sleeping over a friend's house. I was tired that night, so I decided to stay home and enjoy a relaxing night at home while the snow began to fall throughout the night. It was mostly uneventful that evening. Some television early on, and then some Xbox too later on. I remember eating some rice and chicken that night, but it would be important to note also that I neither drank or did any drugs that night, so I knew what to come was real. The clock just struck 11 p.m. only a few minutes back, and I was well into a fun match of Halo, when I got the feeling something was just wrong. I brushed it off as just me being alone, and getting those weird feelings one gets sometimes when alone. Then just as it began to slip my mind, I heard it smack. Fear gripped me for moments as I realized that sound was neither from me or my TV. It was much louder and clear than anything that could have come from the TV. I turned white as I realized it came from the window right above the couch. I turned around in haste and lifted the blinds to see no one. Nothing out of sorts. The snow was falling and everything looked disturbingly normal. Oh, I thought to myself, probably just rocks carried by the wind, or maybe snow or ice from the roof that fell. Despite this self-assurance, I was still gripped with this feeling that something was just wrong, and that whatever hit that window was no accident of nature. I then decided to quench my nerves by going into the office and playing games or watching movies on the computer, just something to get my mind off. For about 30 minutes it worked. I thought to myself, I'm just being silly, and I should enjoy this quality time home by myself. About 34 to 38 minutes after my first occurrence, there came a knock from the window to my right in the office. I wanted to throw up. I knew then that this was no coincidence, and that this was not of the weather or an animal. It was too consistent, too intentional. I immediately ran from my seat to the kitchen, where I grabbed the family flashlight and a large knife, one for investigation and one for defense. If what to come was as bad as my gut was telling me, I ran back down and shined the flashlight out the window into the yard and the forest. I saw nothing, except what I thought were light footprints from the window to the forest in the trace snow on the ground. My mind raced from what this could be to what could happen. I had never been embraced by this much fear in my life. I called my mom, hoping she would answer. Once I was able to reach her, I told her the events of the night, and she then said in a hopeful, yet dead serious tone, "Lock the doors. If it happens again, call the cops. Be safe." My parents were about an hour and a half away, and they offered to come home, but I refused, trying to be considerate of not ruining their evening together. I went to each door and locked them, to each window, and locked then up to my room with a phone, a knife, and a flashlight. I still rejected that this could be real, so I put on some music from my phone and put my earbuds in, hoping to fall asleep, and wake up realizing this was just a nightmare, or a bad case of my head messing with me. I was listening to Queen and on the verge of sleep, When I thought I heard something in the completely quiet house, I took my earbuds off to hear a whack. With each beat, my heart sunk more and more. After a few moments, it stopped, but I was too afraid to move from my bed, and I called my parents. Within about 45 minutes, my parents came home, without further incident. By this time, it was about 3 a.m. I recalled as much as I could and showed them everything. Us three searched the outside of the house, with my dad holding his handgun in case we did find anything. Again, nothing was found, except for deep footprints in the several-inch deep snow now that circled the house several times, stopping in front of the windows and the side door, which upon inspection was beat and crushed in the center with what seemed like a big hammer or blunt object. We waited in the house until morning, when my dad decided to go outside to the forest to see where the tracks led. When he came back, we learned that the tracks led to a small shelter that housed several photographs of our house, and a small sledgehammer with pieces of wood stuck on it, with tracks leading to a road far across the field. I never stayed in the house alone at night for several years after this.